And now for a talk presented by Global Hotel Alliance. Please welcome the CEO of Global Hotel Alliance, Chris Hartley, in discussion with Skift President Carolyn Kremins.
On behalf of all of us Skifters, we're so happy to be in this region and really, really delighted to be with you today. And Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm here on your home turf in Dubai.
About time too.
About time too.
We've been expecting you for a while.
So let's get started. Back in 2004, you started Global Hotel Alliance. It now consists of 40 brands. In fact, I think a slide will come up which will show all your brands. You have over 800 hotels. You have 23 million members of your loyalty program. So it's kind of like the biggest loyalty program that people haven't heard of. So let's change that today. Why did you start the Global Hotel Alliance? What was the white space that you saw?
Well, before I answer that, let me go to the point of the biggest loyalty program that nobody's heard of. And that's pretty much true. And the reason for that, just to address that point straight up, is that we don't have the $700 million that allegedly Marriott spent to launch Bonvoy, to sponsor Manchester United. We don't have the $10 billion that the OTAs have to sponsor everything, the World Cup, the Champions League, and everything else. So we have to do it more discreetly, and we do it through collaboration. But coming to your question, why did we start the Alliance? You have to sort of look back 18 years or so, 20 years nearly now, in the hotel industry and how the industry was changing very rapidly at that time. There were a few things happening. Firstly, I actually came from a company, Kempinski, which is part of the Alliance, one of the founding members, and Kempinski was owned by Lufthansa, and many of the big hotel groups at the time had been owned by airlines, and they were struggling with airlines selling those hotel companies off. How do you cope with distribution? I had a very easy job. We had Lufthansa owning Kempinski. Distribution was easy. Marketing was easy. Every ticket was issued by Lufthansa, had a Kempinski advertisement on the back. Every pilot said as he took off, go and stay at Kempinski Hotel when you land. So suddenly these airlines were selling off hotel assets. And then at the same time, the bigger brands were realizing, the Marriotts and the Sheratons and the Hiltons, that customers were a bit bored with the standardized approach to single brand companies. And so they were creating brand stables. And so you had the birth of the likes of Starwood. And from that came Starwood Preferred Guests and the concepts of multi-brand loyalty programs. The other thing that was happening 20 years ago, I've touched on it already, was the advent of the online travel agencies. And of course, they were at the time interesting. Now they are dominant, and that's been a challenge. And the last thing was big tech. And tech was becoming more and more important for small brands. And if you've only got 20 or 30 hotels, it's very difficult to figure out what technology you need and how you're going to reach a global audience and be meaningful at the same time. So the Alliance was really designed, a bit like the Airline Alliance and Star Alliance One World, which were being born at the same time, was to address those problems for independent asset owners who didn't want to give their assets to the big growing franchises.
Right, well, that kind of leads us right into the next point, which is like, if you're an independent hotel, right, you're independent because you want to be independent, right? You have a lot of pride in being an independent, and investors, invest in independence. So how do you persuade them that it's better to come together with your alliance rather than to do it on their own?
Well, I think the first thing is there's a huge amount of asset owners out there today, among which 60% of our 800 hotels are actually wholly owned, which is more than any of the other big brands out there. And so if you're an asset owner, you're looking very carefully at every dollar. And you've got a choice. I mean, you can give your asset to one of the big brands. You can leave your asset to be distributed on its own, and you're going to have a lot of high-cost third-party business. Or you can look at alternative forms of networking, and historically there's been the likes of Leading Hotels and Preferred and others. We decided the best way was to in-source, create a collaborative organization. And I think the thing that builds trust first and foremost is if you look at all the member brands in the Alliance, our shareholder brands, for example, are Minor and NH Hotels. We've got Kempinski, we've got Pan Pacific, we've got Corinthia. They're all asset owners. So 80% of our Alliance is actually owned by those people. And so their goal is to drive value to their hotels, which they own. Every dollar that we add to the top line or every dollar we can save in costs is going straight to them as asset owners. So that inspires confidence. So when we're trying to grow the alliance, you say we grew from 4 brands to 40 brands, it's very much been about the owners of the alliance being like-minded people, and we collaborate very closely with each other.
Right. So it kind of, I guess, downplays the competitiveness. So, because you have a bunch of independents, and do loyalty members now look to other brands? Does that ever come up, or?
Yeah, I mean, the big goal is really two things. It's reach and incremental revenue. So how do you get incremental revenue, and how do you reduce costs? And if you're an asset owner, to reach markets, if you've got 20 hotels, and I'll use the example close to here, the Leela Group in India, for example. They've got beautiful luxury hotels in India. Well, their biggest market is the US. Well, how do they get to the US cost effectively? Well, the answer is you can go through a third party and sign up to a US mega brand. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Or you can network with a group like ours and get that reach through a shared customer base. So what we've basically done is we've got all of our hotel groups to agree to share their customers. So that's the 23 million. Yeah. And those 23 million are receiving content and communications about all the different brands in the alliance. So Leela, as an independent, privately owned Indian hotel brand, is able to get its brand in front of these 23 million customers. And that's on the loyalty side. And then obviously we have sales and distribution as well as part of that offer.
Right, so it works. So that's obviously it works. We're here 18 years later, right? You sit on a lot of data, I would imagine, right? You have 23 million members. So you also actively do research annually. And in fact, I know you just sent out a press release. You just came out this week with your trends for 2023. So while we have you, I'm sure everyone here wants to know what are the big trend lines for the year ahead. Share some of them with us, if you will.
Well, as I said, we aggregate a lot of data. We sit on one technology platform. I should mention that you can't operate an alliance like this without technology today, and we actually have Oracle as a shareholder.
I was just going to ask you, who's the lucky one? All right.
Bit of American tech in there as well. But it really makes a huge difference to be able to have a single view of the customer, so to have a central database where we can talk to all of these customers and track all of these customers. And talking to customers, interesting listening to previous panelists this morning, where is the world heading in 2023? More importantly, where are customers traveling to in 2023? So we just announced the results of a survey we did, and number one is Japan across all markets. And can't quite figure it out, but I have a few thoughts on why Japan is the most popular destination for people to travel to. Firstly, it had done a lot of work at opening up internationally pre-pandemic. So, of course, there was the Olympics that was a bit delayed. There was the Rugby World Cup. But if you notice Japan, a lot of international brands are also opening up in Japan. It was very much a domestic market, and it was dominated by domestic brands like ANA and JL and Tokyo, legacy brands in Japan. But now you've got the international brands coming in. I think that's had an impact. And more international exposure. So it's exciting to see Japan as a popular destination. Also, Asia generally, it feels that people want to get back to Asia. The restrictions from Asia have taken longer to be lifted. Of course, China's another issue altogether, but Asia has recovered quickly in the second half of the year. And for example, from here in Dubai, the most popular destination, after Europe, Spain is number one for Dubai residents, but Singapore, number two. So markets like Singapore, Thailand, Bangkok are definitely going to be very popular next year. And we asked Chinese people where they wanted to go next year, and they just said anywhere outside of China. So.
How come I'm not surprised? Yeah, and interesting about Japan, because Japan was on such a rise right before the pandemic, but now I think as they open their doors, everyone wants to go. I certainly do want to go back. So anyway, as we wrap up the conversation, I really just want to get kind of to the bottom line, the value of the reach that you bring. There's a lot of hoteliers in the room, and also we have a few hundred people online. Share, like, what are the proof points, right? Like, if you're an independent, what should they know?
Well, 4 things really that we focus on, and I made it simple for myself to remember. They all begin with C.
Okay.
First is cost. As an alliance with 800 hotels, we can help brands reduce costs, especially in technology, in distribution, and in aggregated buying. And that can be through partnerships that we do with third parties like American Express or CWT, for example, but basically by aggregated buying of technology and distribution and partnerships, we reduce costs. The second, which is not necessarily everyone in the room wants to hear, but certainly the hoteliers do, that we have to shift business to less expensive channels. Our brands, typically independent brands, are seeing 30 to 40% of their business coming through expensive third-party channels, and that's a heavy cost burden if you're an asset owner. We do everything we can through the shared loyalty platform, GHA Discovery, to help shift business into less expensive channels. We have a less costly loyalty program by definition because we're owned by hoteliers than the big brands. And so every piece of business we can shift from a third-party channel to a direct channel is a saving of at least 50% or more. The third thing is currency. We don't have a points program. Big brands are big on points, and they're very successful for the big brands, but for individual hotels, it can dilute revenues, especially if you're in a location where there's high demand for redemptions and reimbursements are not necessarily very attractive. We've got a currency. It's a payment system. It's one of the early panelists was saying it's really the future is fintech and creating currency that customers can engage with and understand and is very transparent as a reward system. And we're seeing that's very popular with our hotels because typically they're getting 95 cents in the dollar from reward stays, which are 2/3 of the time incremental stays. And the last one, which you touched on earlier, is what we call cross-brand. And that's the revenue that's driven between all of the different Alliance member brands. We have 40 member brands. So a Capella customer staying in a Pan Pacific customer staying in Nikki Beach. And each time one of those customers moves between brands, we look at the value of that stay. And this year we'll do somewhere around $180 million of cross-brand revenue. In some cities, that represents up to 8 points in occupancy in a hotel. Obviously depends on the location and how susceptible they are to international travel. But that's the real value add. So you're joining a community of brands. They want to stay independent. They want to share best practice. They want to share the challenges that we all face within hospitality, but they do that independently. And we're able to help each other drive incremental revenue and share costs.
Wow. So it's like all boats rise with the tide, right? And you're providing that. So thank you so much. This is a great conversation. The 4 C's, I like it. I feel like I'm buying a diamond. Thank you so much, Chris. If anyone needs any more information, wants more information, contact Chris. It's at your website is globalhotelalliance.com. Very simple.
Very easy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.